Hi friends, this is Caitlin. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm making a really fun winter snow globe card using these purple onion stamps. I love these red rubber stamps. They are the Frosty and Sweet Pea. That's the snowman and the mouse. And then I'm also using this one called Little Pines, but I'm actually going to cut it in half. Don't freak out. I'll walk you through what that looks like, and I promise it's not as scary as it sounds, especially with red rubber. So I started out with my card base, wanting to make sure that I had all of my die cut pieces for this scene that we're creating. I needed it to be sized correctly so that everything would fit in this kind of arched dome shape. So I have my A2 size card, just white cardstock. It's 5.5 by 4.25. And then I trimmed down this fun snowflake blue and white pattern paper so that it's just a tiny bit smaller. It's, I believe, 4 by 5.25, but I might have even rounded up a little bit. It might just be a little bit bigger than that. And then I took my stitched wide arch dies from Pink and Main and I cut a piece of Copic Express It with that. So I have my scene and I know it'll fit nicely on my cardstock. On my pattern paper. Then I started laying out my stamps and I just took sharp scissors and clipped the space right in between those two groups of trees, and it's perfect. I will 100% use these stamps more having two little clusters versus trying to use one large scene of trees across. But if that doesn't speak to you, you could also just add a post-it and not stamp one side of the trees. But for me, with these red rubber, I'd rather be able to just kind of stick them next to each other if I want to recreate the look of the whole tree lineup. I know myself and I'll use these two clusters a lot more on their own. So with the red rubber stamps, you need something to help them cling to your Misty door. If you're going to use a Misty, they're unmounted. So I have this clear mounting stamp also from Purple Onion. And sometimes I wash it and then it dries and it seems perfect. But then by the time I go to use it again, even with the plastic wrap on it or the plastic backing, it feels like it loses its stick. So I found that if I take just a little, like one spray of water to the back of it so that it's just a little bit damp, it clings to the Misty door really well. So I've had this one for at least 4 years. I think it's probably time that I just get a new one. But for now, using that little bit of extra water seems to be working fine. So if you ever have that issue and you're like, well, I know I just washed it, put just a tiny spray of water and that should work. And then the red rubber, the same thing. If the front isn't sticking great, I test it out before I add my ink. I can always go in with just the tiniest spray on the front, and then the red rubber will stick to that perfectly. So once I stamped in my trees and my snow scene, my little snowman and Sweet Pea, I'm going in with some really pale blue markers. And normally for my snow, I like to play around with BV markers or BG markers. But because my background was this really pretty kind of powder blue, I wanted to create something that would work really well with that. So I'm starting out, like I said, with very, very light colors, that B93, B91, adding some more shading to the outer edges of my scene and starting to kind of break up all of that white space. I also knew that I wanted to create a shadow under those trees. So with that, I'm just kind of making squiggly triangles and pulling the color out. And then I'm going to blend out my B91 with some B000. If you're new or here, please ignore my fingernails. I probably shouldn't even mention them. Some people I'm sure would have said they wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't said something. With my health stuff, I'm having a hard time with my nails. There's some hormonal stuff happening and I'm trying to give them a break from my dip powder, but I promise I will have nice nails again as soon as I can. It's mostly just that I feel very self-conscious about it. But if you're going through that too, at least now you know you're not alone. I use the same blues for my snowman, right? I'm adding in that 93 everywhere where one item is overlapping another, and then adding extra shadow to the side of the left side of the snowman's face and under that rim of the hat, because that would be an extra shadow in my opinion. I'm also being sure that where I'm adding the shading around the snowman's body, I'm leaving a little gap in between my shadow and the artist drawn line. That's going to help give that like shiny, frosty, kind of sparkly feel to the snow by having that little bit of a reflected highlight right on that curve. So I wanted to create the entire color scheme to be in this kind of very unsaturated, kind of dusky color scheme. So for my trees, instead of going with bright greens, I pulled out my BG 90 family, and we're starting out with some BG 96, which is going to be our medium shade, and kind of flicking color down on each tier from the top. So that way it looks like there's some snow built up on the branches of each tier. Then I went in with the BG 99, my darkest, just to kind of break that up and add some, depth. Then I went in with my lightest, BG 93, and I'm pointing this out because it's not my usual order of operations. And then with the 93, I just started breaking up the leftover white space so it doesn't look just like a solid line of snow. It's got some ripple and texture to it. Especially because I'm not splattering this with white, so it doesn't feel like it's actively snowing. We're going to add some embellishments, but in my mind it feels different. So that it makes sense that there wouldn't just be a solid layer of snow on each of those tree tiers. Sticking with this kind of less saturated color scheme for my mouse, I decided to go in with my E70s. They're a very kind of taupey, purpley brown, and I love them. They're one of my favorite color families in the E markers, and I think that they're amazing for mice. I usually go E70s or warm grays for my mice. I just think that the color kind of suits them really well. So E79, E77, E74, and then for his little cheeks and the top of his head and the inner part of his ear, I brought in that 71, filled in the rest of his ear with some very light pink. And now, again, following our same kind of color theory here, I'm going in with BV20s, which are very kind of gray, blue violets, but they're just so pretty. And I just love the way that all of these colors really work together. It's a very like cool, wintry color scheme. And in my opinion, it's perfect for like a January and February winter card. So technically this stamp was released as part of Purple Onion's Christmas release. But I think that it's a great anytime winter card and is definitely something I want to have in my stash. For even the carrot, I didn't go for my normal super bright oranges. I went for some YR27 and then filled it in with some very light, I think YR20 markers, just keeping it more closer to like a yellow golden kind of color versus a bright orange. And I brought that BV20 family back in for the plaid on this hat. I'm going to kind of add my shading to the top and bottom or the outer edges of each stripe and then fill in the spaces between so that it has some dimension and texture to it. And I'm filling in all of the white boxes with some B60 just so it doesn't look quite so stark. And for the fluffy lining, I'm going with some E43 and just making lots of little dots and kind of loose C shapes, little curls, and then blending that out with my E41. So also, just so you know, that wasn't like a side swipe transition. That was my camera moving on its own while I was working. For my sentiment, I had left my mounting stamp in my Misty and I just popped in this hello there. Again, if you wanted this for a Christmas or holiday card, you could just easily make that a holiday, like warm wishes for the holidays kind of sentiment. But I thought a little hello there was a perfect all occasion card. I stamped that with bundled sage in the distress ink, my little tiny ink cube there. I used this stitch rectangle die from Pink and Main to create the base of my snow globe, and I'm just adding a tiny little line of liquid glue to the front of my scene and then popping that rectangle right on the front. It's just big enough so that the stitched lines on my rectangle hit the outer edges of that arch, and I think it just is the perfect spacing to make this look like a snow globe. They weren't meant to be like that. You don't have to use these exact sizes. You could also use like a big circle and probably cut it in half if you needed to. But I just want to encourage you to like play with some of this dies maybe that you already have in your collection to see if you can layer them or manipulate them to turn into something else. So I trimmed off the excess of that base, that brown wooden base, which is from the Grain and Grunge. It's like a scrap I had from Honeybee Stamps Grain and Grunge paper pad. And I had also popped that up with some foam tape just to give it a little dimension and interest. Then I added the whole pattern paper base onto our card. And I added these little clay snowflakes that I have. I just got them in like bulk at Michael's. I'm going to have these for the next like 20 years of my life because there's just so many in there. And so I added 3 of those on here, and I'm adding 3 of these really pretty soft blue flat back pearls from Pink and Main. And I just love how this card came together. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you're all staying safe and warm. To any of my viewers out in California, know that my heart and thoughts are with you. I hope you guys are having a good day. I'll see you soon. And until next time, happy crafting.